Okay, I'll be starting the webinar in a couple of moments here and transferring to Chanel.
Thank you.
Okay, and we're all live.
All right. All right. I'm going to just give it a minute more
Mhm.
to see who joins. All right. Well, we can go ahead and get started. A few folks are still joining. But I want to say welcome to everyone. I know Colette, our fearless leader, is planning to join, but she is really under the weather, so she may just appear in the chat some. So thank you all for joining. We're happy to have Dr. Rebecca Mellema back for our second in a series of uh, brief workshops on better communication of our science, especially as we work with non-scientists. So Dr. Rebecca's PhD is in microbiology and immunology, but during her graduate years, she spent a lot of time running workshops, teaching public speaking and storytelling skills to graduate students. And so now she's really working on translating science into a variety of media, including writing, illustration, public speaking, and simple animation. So she really can do it all. And she is one of our volunteers that we're just so happy to get some of her time to do this. She has a science blog called Getting the Science Right, and she delves into science topics with a lens of common science fiction and fantasy trope. So very interesting. A couple weeks ago, she gave us a really great overview of communication techniques. Go ahead and give a thumbs up if you were able to make that session. And yeah, feel free to introduce yourselves if you would like to in the chat. But if you were at that session a couple weeks ago, yeah, please give us a thumbs up. It's worth watching that. I was really impressed with what you were able to cover, Dr. Rebecca, in such a short period of time. A lot about the importance of storytelling and discuss several storytelling techniques, which I think could be really useful as we communicate science. So there was a whole lot in that session. So that training, along with this one, is or will be available on YouTube. So go ahead. We will send out the link after the session as well. So just a couple of logistics before I turn it over to Dr. Rebecca, and that is we do have a Q&A feature because we did this as a webinar. Folks won't be able to unmute, but so use the Q&A and we'll use that as a way after the session to share. Let's see, I think you have to go to more and then Q&A to find Q&A, but it is there. That'll help us organize the questions as opposed to sort of some of the chat feature, which you can also use for introductions or just, chatting, etc. So, and then finally, just after Q&A, please stay tuned for a really brief evaluation session. It's only 3 questions, and that'll help us improve what we're offering to you. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Rebecca.
All right. Hello, everyone. I'm back. Round two, if you weren't bored of me quite yet. So, last time we were talking about how to take stories and then use that structure to then tell our science. Today is a little bit different. Let's get this. There we go. So, this is specifically on how to make friends and influence people as scientists, which we call either the groundwork or you may have also heard it as boots on the ground. So this is going to be face-to-face interactions with people. And these are some of the most important interactions you can have for communication. This is uh, inspired by a book called How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. I highly recommend you read it just in general. But yes, this is inspired by that. And some of the topics I will be discussing are briefly talked about in that book as well, but this is again for science communication. Now, I have done a version of this talk in the past, or parts of this have been in other talks that I've done. And I want to make this clear because this is a common point of confusion. This talk and the points I'm about to give is not to talk about forgiving someone. You are exonerated from forgiving anyone. And when I talk about feeling empathy for someone, that it is not your job to go, I must forgive them. Totally different things. Your job, and what I'm going to be talking about, is to think of this as retraining people. You're going to help them see you and other scientists as sources of information. The other thing I want to make very clear, this is not a talk on social media use. Social media is a fantastic tool and it deserves its own talk. However, what we're talking about is going to be specifically for face-to-face interactions. Unfortunately, a lot of this doesn't necessarily translate over to social media. So keep that in mind as you're listening. Um, so this is the hard truth of our situation so far as scientists. We have to understand that science is inaccessible, not just to us, but also to the general audience. A lot of times, science articles are behind a paywall. And even if someone can access behind that paywall, it's hard to read. The scientific jargon is so thick that most people cannot read that. And then, thirdly, we have to understand that because it's locked behind a lot of these um, gateways, people are going to turn to places such as free blogs that are more likely to have misinformation. So the phrase do your own research, which is something that I've seen a lot come up, especially in the last year, uh, does not work. You have to just take that out of your thought process. You are not going to tell people to do their own research. You're going to help maybe show them how to do appropriate research, or you're going to be the source of their research. And then to tag on to that, I want you to now delete obviously from all your vocab. Because again, because science is so inaccessible to the general audience, it's not obvious. So it's even though it's obvious to a someone in STEM, it is not going to be obvious for everyone else. And using the word obviously is a very quick way to alienate people in your speech. So I just want you all to practice taking that out. Okay, the next point I want to talk about is that we as a STEM community have been what is called othered. We are no longer seen as a part of the general community. We are no longer seen as part of key social groups. Some of that is because of our doing, some of it is not. But that's actually where the phrase, in our ivory tower comes from. We are separated, even linguistically, from the general audience. So that means that one, people will not necessarily look to us in terms of knowledge anymore. Even though, again, yes, we have been experts in our field, but socially, we are not seen in the social, like, network. Therefore, we cannot ever shame anyone into our point of view. What does that mean? Well, that means you cannot go up to someone and make them feel bad about what they have done in order to change their behavior. Now, there is a lot of power in using shame, like talking in sociology, but we can't shame. Uh, Therefore, we're going to find other ways around shaming people in order to change their behavior. And besides, it actually is more effective if we don't use shame. So, so the one goal you're always going to have whenever you're doing boots on the ground work is that whoever you're talking to is going to walk away knowing that you were a scientist and knowing that they had an extremely positive experience with a scientist. So, these next two slides are just a really quick rundown of some very basic charisma boosters that you can immediately start implementing to just help improve how people see you. Because many people in science haven't necessarily done a customer service sort of job before. So, quick rundown. If you want to look charismatic and really get people to like you on a first glance, you're going to exude confidence. So with that power pose, that's a very easy way just to change your stance. Immediately changes how people view you. And then you actually can find common ground immediately, and that will make people like you. I tend to go for what are people wearing? Or if you're a fan of a team and you see they're saying the same ones, make that connection immediately. And then as they're talking, it's actually really good if you let them talk. The more you allow the other person to talk and get their point of views in, the more they are going to see this as a fantastic conversation. Now, there is an asterisk on that, and we'll get to that in some of the other slides. And also, if you're able to then incorporate their points of view or their speech into your conversation, that's going to keep them engaged in your talk. And they're also going to see you again as more charismatic. Second part of this quick charisma 101. This was taught to us in our fellowship training. Your goal is to not prove them wrong. You're not going to tell them that they were wrong. Because the goal of when you're doing boots on ground work, most of the time, is not to prove that you're right and not to gain the higher ground intellectually. Your goal is a change in behavior. So, usually what happens if we try to prove someone wrong, it actually makes them bring up their defenses and it actually can shut down a conversation. So, we have to be cognizant of that. And while we aren't going to prove them wrong directly, we can maybe help them come to that conclusion on their own or help set them up to eventually come to that conclusion. Um, Another very quick thing for trying to improve your charisma, or Riz as the kids call it these days, try to use their name. People love the sound of their name. So while you're talking to them, if you can, either if you're talking to someone you like a politician, get their name and use it and drop it every once in a while you're talking. People love that. Secondly, sorry, not secondly. Whoa, I can't keep count. And then you smile with your eyes. This is something that I had to practice for years. When you're smiling, and if you, unfortunately, sometimes you have to fake the smile or you're really tired and it's going a long time. If you really need to practice smiling with your eyes, and that will help you in case you have to, again, maybe fake a smile, which is reality of some of these things. And then finally, there's something called mirroring. Mirroring is when someone is, talking to you with like frustration and they're against injustice. You're going to quickly furrow your brows and you're going to nod along with them. Or likewise, if they're showing joy and exuberance, you're going to show, again, the same kind of joy and exuberance. We tend to have a habit of just, going a little apathetic when we're talking to people. But if you can continue the mirroring, that again shows that you are engaged in the conversation. We can also use that to our advantage, however, if the conversation isn't going to our way. We actually can stop mirroring someone to make them, if they're going down a certain route and we don't want them to go down that route, we just stop mirroring them and we start doing our own emotions on our face, which can sometimes get them to mirror us. Again, this is just one of those, you're going to have to practice this before you do it out in the field. Okay, now I've gotten some very basic stuff out of the way. Let's talk about what you're going to do when you're communicating research to the general public. You're always going to try to start with the big idea first, and then immediately try to talk to them. Why does this big idea matter to them specifically? Uh, you have to tie what is happening in science to how would this affect you? Maybe it's going to affect the prices. Maybe it's going to affect how they can take care of a family member, etc. People will care about it more if you can directly link it to how it will affect their everyday lives. And then if you can get to the supporting details, fantastic. That's less important when you're doing the face-to-face talks. Yep. And since we had a question about repackaging uncertainty, I do have a whole page on this time. We do know that the unknown does equal scary usually. So our job is to change how we view that, to make the unknown no longer scary. And I like to use the analogy of take one of your favorite movies and take a scene that is like full of emotion. And then you're going to, in your mind, turn off the music. And then you can change the tone of that scene just by changing what background music you have. It's the same scene, but now you have a different emotional orchestra behind it. And that's the trick we're going to use. We can still repackage uncertainty, but we're going to use our own, more exciting background music. Suddenly the unknown becomes the unexplored. Actually, the other day I was talking to someone and they were saying, about how much we don't know. And I said, hey, yes, it's a mystery, and I love a good puzzle. What they taught us in the fellowship was to whatever orchestra background music you choose, which is you're going to be the emotions you show, make sure it's genuine. For me, I like to show genuine enthusiasm for the unknown in science. But yours could be more pensive and, calm, thought-worthy. But whatever it is, make sure it's a genuine reaction. Oh, wait, hold on. What if we're actually needing to talk about the actual stats to people? Because that's just the general uncertainty in science. But what if you actually have to go in and talk about hard data points? Okay, you have to be prepared to like actually sit down with them and read through the stats. But try to see where they're coming from right now, and this will help you figure out where you need to start. Um, Again, you need to see where are they interpreting, where is their interpretation falling apart when they're looking at the numbers. Also, only focus on the data you need. Do not bring in any other stats because that's just going to overwhelm them. But if you can get them to understand what the stats mean or the uncertainty in the data, just what you need. That's the important part. As you're talking to them, again, since the uncertainty tends to have a theme of repackaging, you're still going to be in the thought process of, repackaging these data points, but you need to talk to them as a peer. This will help them be more willing to look at the data points that maybe contradict what they think. The reason being is because I had a really good mentor who, at one of the seminars I was going to, he said that everyone has a PhD level in some skill, be it cooking or be it like car mechanics. And so we need to treat them as such. And again, people are more likely to listen to you if you're treating them on the same level. And again, I just said about the same thing about repackaging. You're still trying to show that you are a fantastic science source. And I was talking about, only choose what you're going to be talking about. Like choose only the data you need. And in fact, that goes for a very general rule of thumb for communication. Don't do what I call hedge your bets. And we've seen people do this for science. Technically you can classify, a square or a cell as a square and a rectangle, or it could be this in this situation and Y in this situation, or a Z, etc. Because we as scientists want to show that we understand the complexity of the systems we're talking about. That's going to be too much when you're talking to someone of a general audience. You need to speak in absolutes. In the example I have here, a rectangle is a rectangle, a square is a square. Usually, when we're teaching people the number system, we start out with just 0 to 100. And then once they get that down, they go from now we have decimal points. Once you have that, now we have negative numbers. Again, you wait till they get the absolutes before you complicate it. Okay, this is a brief page on some tactics about talking to the press, since we're talking about like interpreting data points to people. See if you can get the questions beforehand. They might have a set of questions that they're going to ask you, and if they're nice, they might give it to you already. If not, see if you can get them. You also need to have the science story ready. That was in the past webinar. So definitely check out the past webinar for whatever science story you need if you're talking to the press. Um, when you use jargon, you need to define it. Hopefully the reporter will ask while you're saying it, and if you forget to define it. And as much as possible, avoid the acronyms because that's going to be hard for them to hunt down. Uh, I'm always like thinking of drawing pictures. That was one of the things that they had us do for even just talking to kids, and I think it applies also to press conferences. Not conferences, but just talking to a journalist. You want to have the journalist understand like as much as they can about your research or whatever topic you're talking to them about. And if you have to go to diagrams, do diagrams. Um, and I have just this little bit at the bottom here. Feel free to make them repeat the questions in case you don't understand. You are free to do that. It is something that people forget to do when they're being interviewed. I don't necessarily have a specific page on politicians. And the reason is that everything I just talked about applies to when you're talking to a politician. And also, depending on which state you're in, you may not know when you're talking to a politician. I know in the state of Utah, you do have people who uh, go, cast their votes during legislation. But then most of the other time, they're doing other jobs. Like some of them are professors, some of them are bakers, etc. And that can be the case in many other states. Check your state. But you may also not know when you're meeting them face to face on the street. So, food for thought while you're doing that. Okay. Now, here's the fun parts. What happens if you're doing boots on the ground work and you find yourself talking to science skeptics? Okay. I'm going to separate them into two different flavors for simplicity's sake. And this one is the one that I've run into. I call them the misinformed and the scared. Uh, they are the people who are making choices based on things they found on TikTok or their internet, etc. Your goal again is not to prove them wrong, because if you go in trying to prove someone wrong, the more likely they're going to shut down and not listen to you and completely ignore what you're going to say. So again, first, find common ground, and then you want to find what is the legitimate fear that they are scared of. What is this misinformation feeding in? And this actually is something that a lot of, say, anti-vaxxers are really good at finding. They find the fear that someone, like, again, I'm scared for my kids. That's legitimate. And then they go, aha, we're going to address that by telling you to not vaccinate your kids. So find the same kind of fear, and then you can address that. As you're going through, congratulate them on their good questions. This is to, again, give them credit for them questioning again, like questioning the fears and seeing what it is that they need to do. Um, Again, you're not exonerating them, but you're keeping them engaged and again, trying to keep them to see you as a source of information. I do have a note there. When I'm talking to these people, I just go in my head. Everyone is curious at their core and just want answers. That keeps me from getting angry at them or getting frustrated. Uh, and you've won if they walk away with a positive experience with a scientist, which is what we talked about at the beginning. But this is a start to hopefully them changing their behavior. That is, again, the goal of when you're talking to people boots on the ground. Um, then we have flavor two. I know people might have another name for this, but what I'm going to call them, this flavor is fight for my cause. I have not actually run into these face to face, but I have heard stories, and these are going to be the people who maybe are going to go to conferences or maybe go to places that scientists are known to be at, and they're going to start, using that audience to talk about what they believe or what they think. And ultimately, what they're trying to do is poke you. They're trying to poke you and they're trying to get you angry and they're trying to get you so angry that you get riled up in front of the audience that you have. That then is going to reinforce their belief that scientists are bad people or angry people. So, first thing you need to know is that they're not going to change your mind, and they know that, and you're not going to change their mind. So, they're only trying to rile you up. So, take a deep breath if you're in this situation. No one's mind is going to be changed. Your goal now, what I was trained to do, is to put on a show around you. While they're trying to take the spotlight from you, you can also go like, okay, I'm going to show you that scientists are nice people. And you become the immovable wall that uh, cannot be moved by their poking. It's hard. Um, so another thing I was trained to do is practice what you preach, which is if they're coming at you with very wild claims, you can go, I'd love to have you show me the evidence and article because I'm always eager to learn new things. However, this is what I learned from all my years in science. So it would be fascinating if you could show me your sources. Um, and again, if you don't respond with anger, you have won. And eventually they should walk away. And if you're just not responding the way that they want. Um, However, if they continue berating you, feel free to walk away. Feel free to, shut down the conversation. In fact, this is a great time to talk about boundaries before you do any sort of boots on the ground work. Before you do anything, you need to determine what are your boundaries. Like, are you not going to talk about politics? Are you not going to talk about religion? You're not going to talk about personal life. You need to figure that out before you go and talk to people. Um, and you also need to be able to state the boundaries in the conversation you're having with people. Um, you are free to do that. I give you permission. And uh, hey, friend, I'm not ready to talk about, for me, I'm not ready to talk about politics with an acquaintance. I need to know you better before we talk about that. Let's keep our focus on science. Or hey, friend, we're still strangers. You're a great person, but I'm not going to talk about my personal life. So let's just keep this focused on XYZ. If they continue berating you, though, again, you are free to shut down the conversation for your either mental health or safety, break eye contact, and walk away. Like physically get away from them. All right. So now we talked about boundaries. Let's talk about when you are talking to other people. It is so important that you do not insult your audience. Uh, I say this as someone who saw some talks last year at some of the rallies. Um, we are not, it will not change people's behavior if we insult their intelligence or if we insult their belief system or whatnot. Not that people are free of criticism, but when you insult people, and maybe that gets on the internet, and maybe a politician sees that, or maybe a politician sees you calling them a moron during a public speech, that's not going to help you in the long run. So I would say if you, I personally would just take out all insults, because there are other ways you can rile people up. Um, there are other ways to rally your group. Again, not that people are not free of criticism, but we're trying to think of what are we doing tactically? Is this going to maybe in the future shoot us in the foot? So, food for thought while you're either talking to people or even if you're doing public speaking. All right, so I've talked about a couple things now, and I'm going to give you a little bit of a magic phrase that I use when I am doing face-to-face things with people. That is a good question. This is the magic phrase. Uh, it is a great question to either keep people on a thought process. It's also a great question to maybe steer them away from something. It is a very flexible phrase. So if it's a good question and they're talking about uncertainty, you can be like, scientists are still trying to figure that out, and you can go straight into a little story. Um, that's a good question. That's the exact question that we had until this, and you can even answer their question. If they're asking a question that is way too hard for you, which happens quite often, especially with children, you can go, that's a good question. I can, but that involves so much more than I'm able to talk to you. I generally ask them, it's like, do you have 3 hours of your time? I can teach you organic chemistry. And that generally laughs, and then we can move on. But that's very helpful if you have someone who's like really focused on a topic and just like, how do you do this? And again, so this phrase is a very good trick that you can use to direct the conversation. Um, all right. All right. And then after you're doing face to face, uh, sometimes you can just end the discussion by just saying like, okay, hi, great to meet you. Hopefully, though, we're trying to again have a change in behavior. So, um, if you can, see if there is an action that you can give people at the end of your conversations. Uh, what can happen sometimes, and this is especially true for those talking about climate change, we tend to overwhelm people with dooming facts. Again, if we're trying to change them with, this is happening, and the earth, the ice caps are melting, and the climate is changing, and we give them all the facts. We're so used to having scientists take that information and then doing action themselves. That's not how most everyone else works. What happens is you've frightened them. It's called analysis paralysis. You've given them too much information and they don't know what to do with it. uh, and in this case, the audience now feels helpless if you're just like, these are all the facts, and then you walk away. So have something at the ready if you think that you're going to, uh, get a call to action at the end. One of them, easy one right now, is just call your congressman. If you know of a group, tell them to join it. One of the things I like to do, this is the power of social media. I love that we had a great talk today. If you want to see more on this, I suggest looking at, I give them a list of science communicators. And so that gives them a good place and a good, trustworthy place for them to start looking for information. Or you're like, I love that you're riled up about this. I want you to, think about maybe starting a community garden or maybe bike more. Again, you have an action for these people after you've gotten them emotionally invested. Whatever you do, do not leave them with overwhelming doom. Do not just say, oh my gosh, this is all happening. And so, yes, so have a plan of call to action at the very end. Now, I've talked about some basics here. Do you want some practice? One of the things I've been doing recently is something that I have been calling just for fun, something called Operation Friendly Neighborhood Scientists. All I do is that I go to, currently it's a Green Lake. I walk around with a sign saying I am a scientist, chat with me. I enjoy a drink, and I've actually had people talk to me every single time. So it's low maintenance and you get a good walk in. And it's a really good way to practice your science communication if you've never done it before. Um, so if you want and you want to get practice, grab a sign. Uh, you always have to have it. You have to have an invitation to chat. You can't just be like, I'm a scientist. You have to have something that says either give me your favorite science fact, or chat with me, or something that says interact with me in some way. If you have science swag, for example, I have my hyaluronan, bandana I can wear. I also have a sweatshirt that says, science, it's like magic, but real. Like everyone as science has some degree of a science swag that they can wear. And I highly recommend you do it if you're going to do something like this. Hang in high traffic areas. And this is, again, a low effort way for the community to see and talk to a scientist. Also, only do this if you feel safe. I must unfortunately repeat that. Only do this if you're feeling safe. Maybe that's not for you. Maybe try maybe chalk art. Maybe do some science poetry. There's some slam poetries in different areas. Maybe do a whole talk on ribosomes. Maybe you want to do some science songs. Or maybe you want to do some science TED Talks at maybe your local cafe. There are many ways for you to interact in your community. And you know what? Maybe you're someone who doesn't want to reinvent the wheel and you want something that's a lot more organized. Good news, there's a lot of different ways you can still do boots on the ground work with organizations. The ones I have worked with previously are Letters to a Pre-Scientist and Skype a Scientist. These are fantastic organizations that also do a little bit of training if you join them. Uh, there's also Science on Tap that's becoming a thing. If you're at a university, definitely check out if there are any outreach programs that you can join, because they're already organized and they already have ways for you to get boots on the ground practice. And also, there might be science improv groups in your area. That'll be a great way, again, to help you practice uh, interpersonal relationships, and you'll also have fun on stage. All right, that is the end of my talk, my part two. And again, if you want to chat about either upcoming talks, or you'd like to talk about if you have your science story in the ready, or if you want to talk about a um, March 7th discussion, or you're doing one of the talks at the rallies, you feel free to contact me here. All right, that's all I have. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you, Dr. Rebecca. We have a lot of questions in the chat. I apologize that the Q&A isn't working. It's working on our end. It looks available, so apologies that you don't have that. Jess, as you are the host, are you seeing an option for each participant to allow them to talk if someone wants to have their question out loud? While you figure that out, and let me know, I will go through the chat and say at first, and so let's see if she's still on the line. Somebody didn't understand the shame frame, Susan Wilhite. And so I wasn't exactly sure. Susan, are you still on? No, she's not still on. But could you
Okay.
say, yeah, a little more about the shame frame?
Yeah, so shame is the general idea that we use when we try to make someone change their behavior by making them feel bad. And we do try to do that. I've seen it a lot with scientists, not necessarily for Stand Up for Science, but just in general. We tend to insult people We tend to insult their intelligence and then hope that that changes their behavior. I don't know, for example, you might hear that like, I don't know why you're not trusting the science to protect your babies. Now now we have the measles outbreak. If you're saying that to someone, you're trying to make them feel bad in order to change their behavior. That is what shame is. And it's not that effective for us to do for multiple reasons, as I stated. But
Yeah. So I know Kathy had posted, what's the best way to practice all this? It's going to feel unnatural when I toss it all in at once. I'll be thinking too hard about it. And then she
mhm.
later said, yeah, you kind of answered that question. But, other than it occurs to me if you're not ready to do what you suggested, like go out in public, like your experience to doing this, how do we get experience before we decide to go out in public with a whiteboard saying, hey, talk to me?
Uh, so two things. I would say first, try it on your family members. You have probably some nearby friends or family members who you could practice this with. But the second part I will say is sometimes you just have to jump in and do it. And you have to be prepared to fail, and it's gonna be okay. You're gonna if you fail, it's not that big of a deal, especially if you're doing a low like you're just chatting with someone. If you fail that conversation, you can walk away and go, "Okay, I'll try better next time." So the reality is that while you can practice all you want, the real practice is when you actually are just gonna dive in and do it. Um, because again, you can think about what you're gonna do, but yeah, for our fellowship, they just kind of threw us at yeah, we talked about all these these workshops and everything, but then we actually just had to have children come up to us and ask us questions for 2 hours while we ran little sites. And like, yeah, that's the only way you can really practice it is just do it.
Yeah, we have a few more in the chat, but I'll say Chris Fisher, if Jess, if you could open up Chris's line.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep.
Hello.
Hey, Becca, how's it going?
Hello.
I know this is a little bit different from your talk topic, but I think it's related. How do you feel about scientists engaging in sort of online debate culture? Think about like an example would be like Jubilee's Surrounded series. Do you think that helps or hurts, conversations with the public?
So I've seen Jubilee's stuff. I don't know. Because here's the thing. You want to have a platform for your science. The problem with something that Jubilee does is that they not only give platforms to scientists in those cases. I'm thinking of like Dr.
Dr. Mike.
Dr. Mike, thank you. Yes, I was thinking of Dr. Mike. My problem is that they give so much more time to the opposing ideas. And then also how they have that structured is that it's always the defender having to prove their point, which is something that is a huge problem and something we try to avoid because like having you prove a point and you having to cite things is so much more of a mental work and mental load than is fair to the person who can just throw any random claim. So I have a fundamental problem with how they run that series. Um, but it is a good question about do we engage in online discourse? I think there is a way to do it. I think we need to just have our own platforms,
Mm.
and then we have discussions with other experts rather than giving, positions to people who are clearly not experts. Social media is again a different ball game than, again, being on in real life, talking to someone. Yeah, that's Jubilee's. Yeah, I have issues with that series.
Yeah, like I said, I use that just as an example, but I mean, obviously, like, for our point of our conversation today, this is
Mhm.
really about being in person, but I think access obviously is higher on like social media and online. And I think it does color the conversations that we have in public, right? I think a lot of people saw Dr. Mike's Jubilee debate. I think it's problematic in some ways, beneficial in others.
Mhm.
I know that him and Paul Offit are also having a discussion about this exact point on another podcast soon. So, anyways, I just think it's interesting. So, thank
Mhm.
you for your answer.
Yeah, but so I come at it though as people on the internet are going to internet, but how do you actually change someone's mind? And I'm of the opinion that you can do more change in person,
Well said.
because you're less likely to have that, screen there. People are more willing to listen to you and more willing to change their behavior if they're talking to another actual person. Again, not that online isn't powerful, and you can see that I do a lot of online stuff as well, but I think online is really good for when you have the good resources and we can point to people in the right resources. It's fantastic repository. Um, but it's also too easy to get lost in the weeds in. And so,
Or know if
yeah.
you're debating a bot or something.
Yeah, you don't know if you're debating bot. And like, it's, we were told for our fellowship, and I'm just going to go for them to the fellowship training for this. It's not worth your time arguing with someone on the internet, like in text, like in the
Mm.
comments. Because again, like not only are you giving them a platform, but also it may not be a real person at this point. So
Right. Right. Yeah, I know.
yeah, so you only have a certain amount of this is becoming like a huge talk. I'm so sorry, but you only have a certain no amount of energy to communicate with people. Are you going to waste that on someone who may not even be there?
Yeah, yes, that's interesting, because it seemed like some of the things that you just said were sort of polar opposite of what you said about in person. And so when you said at the beginning, this is not about social media, I'm like, that was absolutely right.
It's not. It's a total
Yeah,
different ball
yeah,
game.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, like, okay, so one of the other questions is here, can we assume intent when people are viewed as trying to take the spotlight? And I think that was in reference to one of your questions about intent.
Um, I'm trying again. I have been lucky enough right now that I haven't run into people like this. I think it's gonna be one of those. It's gonna be one of those situations where you may answer a question, they may ask a question, and you may answer it, and then they either keep talking over you, which is one way they can take the spotlight, or the other one is that they keep trying to prove you wrong, or for the examples that we were given for our training, it's like they won't leave the microphone and they won't stop like demanding you answer them. Um, so it's one of those things like you will have to have a gut feeling of like, oh, I don't think this is going the way this is not going the normal way. And hopefully if you have enough experience talking to people, you will have the instinct of like, this is not a normal conversation. This is yeah, and I do apologize. I have been lucky not to actually run into them in the wild yet.
Yeah.
I've run into other folks, but not uh, there is a word I'm going to use for it, but I'm not on here for science, Santa for science.
It seems more like somebody trying to get like media, like trying to, you know, get a gotcha sort of moment for social media. So and this I like this question from Daniel Gordon. It's can you ask, you know, when you're having these discussions and they maybe bring up a reference or something or some information, can you ask, is that your opinion? Or ask if they have reliable references to support their argument.
You do, but you don't say it like that. So that's the trick of like you don't prove them wrong. You go, "Oh my gosh, because we have these little things, we have these little computers." You go, can you show it to me?" And then you can maybe go through it with them and you can go like, huh, that doesn't make sense. Huh, that doesn't make sense. Or again, if you're like, a lot of times if they're citing things and you ask them to then show you the data, they probably don't have it. And that can, yes, I- yeah, you do have the power of a tiny computer in your hand though that you can use. And you don't, you, I know this is so frustrating, but when you're trying to change someone's like mind or behavior, you don't necessarily go like, is that your fact or opinion? You're like, wow, how did you get to that understanding?
I think one of the things you said in a conversation when we were talking about this training was your goal isn't always to change someone's opinion. Sometimes it's just to have a positive interaction with a scientist, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, and then if they like you and you actually, and if you're able to give them a reliable resource, because what I like to do is go, you seem to have enjoyed our conversation. Let me point to you to like some really cool people. So,
Um,
um,
Yeah. Okay. Here's a question. When you say boots on the ground work, what do you mean? What sorts of situations does that refer to? Sort of where could you use this sort of other than the scenario you presented? I mean, March 7th rallies could be one, everyone, for
yeah,
those that will participate. But sorry, go ahead.
yeah. So boots on the ground work is for me specifically, you are talking to someone face to face in real life, and you are showing that you are a scientist. That could be even if you're at a like family dinner, depending on your family situation. Um, for me, it's just what I'd like to do. It's yeah, going up to people and saying, "Hi, I'm Dr. So and Dr. Becca Mellum." I don't know why I'm saying say so and so. Sorry, I'm doing so many hypothetical situations, but it's where you are face to face with people and you're representing science in some way. Uh,
Yeah. Great. Okay, so here's a comment from Dan DeMott. I'm a retired design engineer. When a friend says something like, wind turbine blades can't be recycled, I respond by saying, I don't understand that. Most materials can be recycled. So what are they made of? Even other engineers haven't usually thought this through. So if nothing else, this question gets them thinking beyond the Fox News criticisms.
yep. This is the like you don't tell them they're wrong, but you do help them figure it out.
Yeah, like is the curiosity piece that you talked about, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, all right. So what is your feeling our science expert scientists losing? I don't know. I don't know if we want to answer
Losing
that.
losing our minds or
Losing, are we losing the battle? It seems a little bit, I mean, hey, that's why we're all here because we kind of, the anyway, yeah, what are your thoughts? And or if we are losing, how can we? It seems like we need to get more of these skills and actually get out talking to people.
so I this is coming from many years during my PhD of people not telling me communication was important and then suddenly it is. I'm not going to think of this as a winning or losing. I am thinking, are we equipped? So I'm not even going to answer it. Are we winning or losing? I can't answer that. I'm not going to look at the battlefield because my concern right now is not how is the battlefield looking, but I'm going to go, are we equipped? And currently, most of the STEM community, in my opinion, is not equipped. We have not done basic communication trainings. Because many places just don't find that necessary. So currently, I think we are unequipped. Does that mean we are losing? Um, I don't think I don't think I can answer that.
I like that response though. Um, and yeah, we all can do better. I think for me, it was, we may have got training on how to do better slides, how to do a better poster presentation at an audience, but that's like to other scientists, right? So
Mhm.
it's always about the really talking to other folks that is a lot harder. Um, all
Yeah,
right.
and I will also point this out just at the end of this webinar. You may find that science communication is not for you. That is fine. But it's worth noting that someone may not know that they are a good science communicator until they are introduced to it. So this is an opportunity for people to try it out. And if this is your calling, fantastic. If this is like, wow, this is not necessarily my calling and I'm not going to do the like actual practice or whatnot, you have still been given some really valuable like training and information.
Great. Well, on that note, I will say thank you, Dr. Rebecca, for helping us get some of that information.